Welcome to the broadcast, my dears. Before we get going, I think that it's only right that we should mention the fact that this week would have been the 64th birthday of Princess Diana, and I think all of us would love to send our loving thoughts and remembrances in her direction, wouldn't we? And coincidentally, it is also the 80th birthday of Debbie Harry on the same day, another fine blonde icon. So I would like to make sure that we send all of those spectacular birthday wishes her way. But the truth is out, isn't it, my dears? The truth is out. Just how much the late Queen Liz loathed Meghan Markle. How she saw her coming a mile off, my dears. And she said, no, you're not going to cosy up to me in my bedchamber. You're not going to be on my leg and tell me that it's raining, my dear, because I am the true queen. Do you understand? The only Lilibet that counts. So you can shove your auspices down our throats as much as you want, my dear. There's only one queen. She's dead. She's dead, and it was never you. Lady Elizabeth has spoken. There's a fly in this room. I'll never get rid of it. Oh dear, let me try and take a pew. Somewhere, a little more comfortable, next to the only other Queen Elizabeth that we are going to see this year, Elizabeth I. Let me give you a wiggle. Oh, where's my notes? We'll start with a remark from Rossi Girl, who said, River, could you please add your 10pence worth regarding the story in the Daily Mail today about Lady Elizabeth Anson's diary entries? How interesting that nobody in the royal family seems to have bought into the notion that Meghan was madly in love with Harry, but more importantly, how sad to read how upset our dear late Queen truly was at their shenanigans. Well, of course, it all evolves from two stories that have emanated from the Mail. The first one was by Martin Robson, and it was detailing how the late Queen became disillusioned with Harry, wary of Meghan, and confided in her cousin, Lady Elizabeth Anson, who died in 2020, by the way, at the age of 79 years old. So she didn't even live long enough to see the entire affair explode as it did, and imagine how appalled and how absolutely disgusted she would be at what came to pass after her death. And the second story came in via Robert Jobson, who lifted the information from the writings of Sally Bedell Smith and the disclosures on her Substack. And these disclosures come directly from the notes of Sally's conversations with Lady Elizabeth. Because they were very good friends, you see, the journalist and the royal biographer, Sally Bedell Smith, became very chummy over a period of 22 years with Lady Elizabeth. And Lady Elizabeth, of course, was a great niece of the late Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Her mother was a Bowes-Lyon, you see. She was Anne Bowes-Lyon. She was also a goddaughter of King George VI, and she was Queen Elizabeth's confidant from the time of the Golden Jubilee in 2002. She had a sterling reputation as an excellent party planner, and she used to put on great parties for the late Queen, one in particular for the late Queen's 80th at the Ritz. Well, it turns out that Lady Elizabeth actually watched the engagement interview featuring Harry and Meghan together with Sally Bedell Smith, who happened to be taking tea with her at her Ladbroke Grove apartment. And Lady Elizabeth said at the time that she thought that Meghan was rather poised and natural and intelligent and thoughtful. She said, you can feel a very loving connection. Meghan is clearly brighter than Harry, but she has to be careful not to overshadow him. Well, she went on to meet Meghan. She met Meghan the following February, and she said that Meghan was full of charm, like any witch. She was full of charm, but it was pointless to have a meeting with her, because Lady Elizabeth raised various ideas for the wedding. As the Queen's close confidant, you think she might have some sort of insight into the way things run. But it all fell on deaf ears because Meghan told her, I can't make any decisions because Harry's in Africa. Sorry, lady. I'm a duchess to be, and then a queen after that. She'll have to stick a lady, and you know what they say about the lady. She's a tramp. Well, following this, Harry actually wrote to Lady Elizabeth, and he said that they were going another way. No, he and Meghan wanted another way. Meghan's got her ideas, and she's really highfalutin, and she's really progressive, and they do things so differently, overseas. So she's bringing in some of the new style over here. She needs to kind of teach people what's what. Do you understand? Yeah. And, yes, we're going another way, Lady Elizabeth, sorry. He said,
I am very close to my grandma. You know, she's my granny and I'm her favourite. I'm close to my grandmother and she is content with this.
But Lady Elizabeth said, when I spoke with the Queen, she said she is not at all content. Not at all content. Do you see how the boy lies, invents and deceives to serve his own purposes? And Lady Elizabeth said to Sally, Meghan could turn into nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble. She sees things in a different way. Well, of course she does, my dear Lady Elizabeth. Meghan sees things her way. She's weaving a tapestry. She's telling a story of a princess in a tower full of chandeliers to swing from, and honey to make, and bread to bake, and tapestries to sew by hand, shipped out to the factories of China. Well, in all seriousness, Lady Elizabeth actually said that Queen Elizabeth was dismayed. She was very, very upset that Harry hadn't actually followed established protocol. Because do you know what he had done? Do you understand what he had done? Instead of going to the Dean of Windsor first, in the first instance, he had gone running straight to his chum, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is no longer the Archbishop of Canterbury, the guy who arranged the real wedding away from the spectacle in Windsor. Yeah, Harry had gone against protocol and run straight to the Archbishop of Canterbury, asking him to conduct the wedding service without requesting permission from the Dean of Windsor. This is what you do first. This is what the late Queen knew. This is what she told Harry. And that is exactly what Harry ignored.
Oh, Queenie, Granny, do you think you're a little bit delicate now that you're in your dotage and you're not quite as with it as my wife to be? So, because we love you, we think that we should tell you exactly how to do things.
Well, as you can imagine, the late Queen found it extraordinarily upsetting to be put in this predicament and to be completely and utterly ignored, with her wishes and desires dashed, as well as her good advice and good counsel. Matters between the Church and the State involve an intricately woven tapestry that shouldn't be meddled with. There are procedures of hierarchy, and the Queen was obviously extremely concerned that this would be a grave insult to the Dean of Windsor. Lady Elizabeth said, Harry seems to think the Queen can do what she wants, but she can't. She actually can't. On the religious side, it is the Dean of Windsor's jurisdiction. But Prince Harry overrode it. And I feel really quite sorry for the late Queen, because as well as being upsetting on a personal level, that her own grandson ignores her advice in such a manner, in such a brusque manner, it was also highly embarrassing for her. Lady Elizabeth said Harry had blown his relationship with his grandmother. She said she was really upset. I was shocked when the Queen told me this, how she was so saddened. I had no idea about the conversation, that he was rude to her for about 10 minutes. Yes, Harry was rude in conversation with the Queen for 10 minutes. They had tea with her the day before yesterday. The Queen was trying to find out about the wedding dress. What's it like, you know? And Meghan wouldn't tell her. Meghan would not tell the late Queen Elizabeth anything about the dress. And this was at a time, by the way, when Prince Philip was hobbling around on crutches because he was due to have a hip replacement, and he was in absolute agony, an absolute distress. And even the fact that he was married to the Queen and was himself a prince and a duke, couldn't find a surgeon because it was Easter holiday weekend. They all went away. Sorry, busy, can't help. So poor Prince Philip was hopping around, legless, pegless, on crutches, seriously in absolute distress at this time. And then after he did have the surgery, he went straight into a rehabilitation of sorts at Windsor, but he was apparently completely and utterly focused on preparing for the wedding because he was old and he wanted to make sure that he got through the day as he did without any aid or assistance. Remember a little thing called duty, Harry? Duty and service. Well, time passed, and towards the end of April that year, Prince Harry got in touch with the late Queen, and he offered her an olive branch. Oh, how kind of you, Harry. Aren't you an absolute gent? A gentleman and a scholar. Don't know about that, ask Eton. Don't know about the scholar part or the gentleman part. Lady Elizabeth said, the Queen and Harry have patched things up. He came to her on his own. Oh, what a big boy. She said she felt very left out, so he wrote her a letter about what was happening. Apparently, Thomas Markle Sr. was absolutely petrified at the thought of coming to the wedding. I mean, we all regret the fact that he suffered medical emergencies that disenabled him to come, but would he ever really have turned up? And apparently he was just absolutely so petrified of Meghan, for one thing. Not just the international audience of the whole affair, but also of Meghan herself. Sally asked Lady Elizabeth, you see, if Meghan was being bossy, and Lady Elizabeth said, so I gather, very much so. Very much so. Well, a fortnight before the wedding, on the 19th of May, Lady Elizabeth had just heard from the Queen, who said that the jury is out on whether she likes Meghan or not. The jury was out. And Lady Elizabeth said, my Jemima is very worried because she called the late Queen Jemima. That was her name, which we won't dwell on too much because, as I've told you before, the name Jemima conjures up strange images for me because I once met a young man who had a doll called Jemima, and let's just say they were a little bit too intimate for my liking. But regardless, she said, my Jemima is very worried. The Queen's very worried. Harry is besotted and weak about women. We hope, but don't think, that she is in love. We think she engineered it all. Meghan was to arrive at her own wedding with Doria because Thomas Markle couldn't do steps, and so the plan was for him to use the side entrance to hobble in at the side and then meet them at the main entrance together and proceed with Meghan. As we all know, it went on to be poor old Charles that got lumped with the gal and graciously lent his arm. That was apparently a thankless task. Lady Elizabeth said, Meghan and William and Kate are not working well. Go figure. That is what the Queen said, particularly about the two girls. No, it was handbags at dawn. And don't reach inside and pickpocket Kate's lip gloss, Rachel. It's worrying that so many people are questioning whether Meghan is right for Harry. The problem, bless his heart, is that Harry is neither bright nor strong, and she is both. As we know, the fateful day arrived and the marriage took place, much to all of our chagrin. It took place and Meghan was liked, and she was welcomed by everyone in the kingdom. Everyone. Aside from a handful of trolls in the far-flung corners of the press and the internet. You know, these far-flung corners, but of course the Sussex had their blinkers on, and they didn't see the fact that 99.99999999999% of the kingdom were welcoming and adoring them and offering them every grace in the world. They focused on the infinitesimally small percentage of haters and bigots that there inevitably are going to be in any society, because simply for the fact that they were not admirers worshipping at the altar. You know, this is where they set their sights. Remember what Jason Clouse said about Meghan. She always seems to have somebody in her sights, that Duchess. Always seems to have someone. Well, by autumn time, there were rumblings of discord, and by late February 2019, Lady Elizabeth told Sally Bedell Smith, she said, I don't trust Meghan an inch. To begin with, she was not bad, a straightforward starlet, used to public speaking and charity work, but the wedge between the brothers is really too bad. And Queen Elizabeth was at this time coming for various afternoon get-togethers and chinwags at Ladbroke Grove, at Lady Elizabeth's pad. She came regularly to dine together, you see. Prince Philip was invited at this time to all the get-togethers, but the late Queen Liz loved to come and have a gossip and a catch-up alone with Liz Anson. She really did, because Lady Anson was great fun, and she knew how to put on a party, whether it was for 1,000 or for one. And when she would host the late Queen, and when she would put on a dinner, for example, she held an intimate gathering for Queen Elizabeth, and there were 14 guests, and instead of issuing them with place cards, she issued them with solar-powered miniatures, little statuettes of the Queen nodding away, you know, as these things do, and waving away, powered by the sun. And the Queen was quite enchanted, and Lady Elizabeth said that she took one for herself and she placed it on her desk in Windsor Castle. And she said, the sun comes out and it goes click, 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 and I see myself waving to me. Lady Elizabeth said, the Queen likes to come to me. It's familiar, and she has a place on the sofa. Oh, isn't that lovely? That's all you want in life, isn't it? A great big comfy sofa. Oh, I'm going to just dive onto one now, my dear. Come join me. Come join me. I haven't got much space, my dear, but we can cosy up, can't we? Nothing like a comfy sofa and a friend, is there? And a nice cup of tea. It'll solve all the problems. So that is what the late Queen used to love to do. And Lady Elizabeth said, yeah, she knows her place on the sofa. Nobody knows she's here. And they didn't know until actually, eventually, they were caught by the Daily Mail, but it didn't put off the late Queen. She actually returned for another chinwag the following week. Well, from 2016, Lady Elizabeth Anson, or Liz, or Lizzie, Liza with a Z or an S, or all the other nicknames she possesses. We'll call her Lady Elizabeth for today, or Lady Liz. But, she developed a chronic respiratory illness affair. And it was very clear that the situation had a certain amount of gravity attached to it. There were hospitalizations, and the late Queen, of course, was aware of all this and sad about it. And she did a few little things to let her friend know how much she was appreciated. For example, she invited Lady Elizabeth to a state dinner, which she hadn't been invited to one before. You know, these are highfalutin occasions. So Lady Elizabeth attended, and she spent a glitzy night at the Ritz Hotel, and then she went in for her lung surgery the following day. And eventually lung cancer was diagnosed. This was in 2019. And she was permitted to sit in the Queen's box at Ascot, amongst other things, whenever she wanted to. And there was space made for her breathing apparatus in the cupboard there, to provide oxygen for her. But the thing is with Lady Liz Anson is that she thrived on human contact. She liked being around people. She was one of many and millions, that became very isolated during COVID and the lockdown, and didn't do very well throughout that entire period, which is understandable. And the Queen got in touch with her and she said, you can expect a little present to arrive. And a few days later, a man arrived smartly dressed in royal livery and handed Lady Liz Anson a letter in it containing the fact that she was invited to become appointed as Commander of the Royal Victorian Order, an honour that reflects the personal esteem of the monarch and is given in her own gift. And it was just a few weeks before this that the Harkles had bolted from the kingdom. And Lady Elizabeth made a few interesting observations throughout her time with Sally. For example, she would speak on Diana and what she thought of Diana, especially in the early days, because Sally had been researching for a book that she wrote about Diana. And she said Diana was a shy and rather gauche bridesmaid. She's talking about the time period when Diana was about 16 years old. And Lady Elizabeth had planned Diana's sister's wedding, Lady Jane to Robert Fellowes. Yeah, that was planned by Lady Elizabeth, who was also, of course, assistant private secretary to the late Queen. And Lady Elizabeth said that Diana was not particularly pretty. Harsh, right? Harsh. Not particularly pretty, with a tiny hint of red in the hair, which is something that people often miss out, especially those who say, well, how can he possibly be Charles's son? He must be James because James is ginger and so is Harry. Well, so are most of the Spencers, my dear. It's a Spencer's trait, and it was in Diana's own hair. It may not have been on the hair on her head very long after she married Charles, and she went rather indulgent with the bleach, which I thoroughly approve of, by the way. Of course, that's when she became an absolute rave. But it doesn't mean that every part of her body hair remained blonde. Some of it continued with ginger, or should I say auburnised fur. Little hints of red shining through that I'm sure our darling Haribo possessed before the greys of autumn began setting into the dandelion affair. But after that, and after Diana went blonde, Lady Elizabeth actually had a lot of praise for Diana, especially the way that she handled the press in those early days, saying that she was always polite to them, she was never rude, and that she didn't panic at that moment in time, unlike the Harkles, of course. So we can't blame all of that on Diana when it comes to Harry, of course. She does admit that it was very hard for Charles, actually, to watch the adulation that Diana received. She was so adored wherever she went. She stole the limelight. You have to remember that pre-Diana, Charles was the star of the show, and his ego was rather fragile and did take a hammering. I mean, it was such a huge scale, Diana's popularity, and just this fabulous glittering beauty effect that she had of the movie star in a completely new way, which Meghan is constantly trying to emulate, by the way, but she ends up as this cheap, sort of warm version of Diana, but it was hard for Charles, and privately Diana was refusing to come down and dine, even when the late Queen would invite her and say, will she please come dine with us? No, she took to her room. Of course, she was going through all her struggles with bulimia and everything. Very hard for her, but also very difficult for everyone else because of the mood swings. She was constantly erratic. She was throwing tantrums, hurling herself at the carpet and thumping the floor. And there's ways and methods to cope with that and deal with that, and people are more educated these days, I suppose. But back then, although they tried very hard and are very au fait with the matters of psychology and therapists and all of this, trying so very hard in all of those areas, at a certain point, it was very hard for them to deal with, and Charles withdrew because he wasn't having any success with the girl. So thank you for having a bit of fun with me today, my dears. I am going to treat myself to a little drink now. I am absolutely flabbergasted. I am absolutely flabbergasted, my dear. Wandering around this rather cavernous bedchamber. I really wanted to take you with me on my travels, as I've been promising to, and I have to say it has been a bit of a challenge. I took a taxi outside of London. It took a couple of hours to get where I am now, and it happens to be the hottest week of the year in history, I believe. As you know, us Englishers don't do so well with the heat, and thankfully there is a delicious fan provided in this room, and it's cooling down now. But I was hours late getting here. I've got lots to do while I'm here, and I'm all of a dither, to be quite honest, as I'm quite sure you can see from my behaviour and from the video, but it's because I didn't have very long to get this recorded. Just a little slice of time, and I was already running late, so I'm just running around like a mad thing, my dear, with a few scrawled notes, just trying to entertain in the best way that I can. So thank you for joining me. Join me for a drink. Join me in the bath later. You know, one thing I don't like in this place, which is gorgeous, by the way, is the fact that you go in the bathroom and it hasn't got, it's not partitioned, which is nice. You can still see the high ceiling of the bedchamber. But then behind me is the water closet area. And that doesn't have a door. So any sounds or perfume that might emanate from those quarters would be heard by anybody else, any other companion in this bedchamber. Wouldn't that be something one wouldn't really want to experience? Look at that, darling, as the sun sets on a beautiful, gorgeous day. Beautiful, gorgeous day here in my castle. No, my dear, I'm sure I will share more of this venue in future. But for now, that is just about it. So from Elizabeth and Elizabeth I wonder what she would have made of Elizabeth II. I think she would have been delighted, don't you, my dear? What do you think, darling Lizzie One? And what do you think of all this Lilibet, the sequel nonsense? Yeah, her face says it all, doesn't it? Oh, I can't get it in view. Yeah, her face says it all. Yes. Right. Onwards, onwards. There's so much to see. Oh, I'm taking you in a darkened closet. All you can see is my jewels are spangling. Isn't that wonderful? Disco halo. Ah, yes, boogie on down with the disco halo. That must be the dungeon. I need a few slaves, don't I, to keep in there? Yeah, I do, my little dungeon. That is what is required in a venue such as this, my dear. What do you think of the old chandeliers, eh? Shall I swing from them later, my darling? Thank you for joining me. I will see you next time. Have I got anything else left to say? No, just take care. If you enjoyed me showing you around somewhere different and you would like me to do it again, you might like to show your appreciation and encouragement by sending a little tip jar treat my way for a little martini and lemonade at the bar this evening. That'd be really nice. That would be gorgeous. But if you don't want to do that, you can simply leave a juicy comment or send your good wishes, and that will be more than sufficient and much appreciated. See you next time, my dears. Doodle pip and lots of love. Ta-ra!